I think the best cake is further away from the worst cake than the best pizza is from the worst pizza. Is that fair?
Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/Lexitecture.
Today's episode, Devastated Orphan. Do we want a word?
Let's do a word, yeah.
I went first.
Do you want me to go
Yeah,
first?
you go ahead.
Okay. I've had this word in my pocket for a little while.
Okay.
And I started off, I had one of those, I wonder things. And so I looked it up and I it's very rare for this to happen, but my wonderment was entirely assuaged. I was able to find the answer to the question that I had.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And then I kind of thought, maybe that's not really interesting enough. Like, maybe that's not enough meat on the word to kind of talk about it for an episode.
Right.
But actually, I feel like it is. So it's a bit of a bish bash bosh word, like, just like, let's get it done.
Okay.
But I was really, really curious about how this kind of, it's quite rare to have a question about etymology and have it kind of fully satisfied.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
There are lots of could be this, could be that, origin unknown, theories say, scholars argue, but to just sort of say. So the word that I'm going to talk about today is devastate.
Oh.
And the reason that this word piqued my interest to start off with is because I found myself, and you're probably in the habit of doing this too, because you have the sort of brain that's slightly silly and ridiculous like mine,
yes,
and likes to play like mine. And I saw it written down and I read it as devastate. And I thought, can one vastate?
Yeah.
Have we devastated? And what is vastating anyway? And what is it that we've lost by devastating it? So I looked it up to find out if the de did indeed mean to take away. And I discovered that it does not. Oh, okay. Because, my God, talk about bang for your buck. Now, I said to you there when you asked me if I was ready to record, and I said I was just losing my mind over a seemingly insignificant detail.
Right.
The seemingly insignificant detail, it's actually quite significant for this episode, I would say, considering what I'm about to talk about, concerned the pronunciation of a word that I often struggle with it myself in a sort of a, is it this way? Is it that way? I can't remember. How do I find out? Oh, fuck it, it doesn't matter. I'll say it this way and it'll be fine, kind of thing. Right. Like, I have a lot of words like that. Yeah. And, I like to be right because I'm a dick. So quite often that sort of manifests itself as me saying, no, it's like this. This is how it's said. That's the end. And,
right.
I'm trying to be better.
I'm working on it.
However, the word is, and I know how to pronounce it because I was looking it up on YouTube as you messaged me to say, are we ready to go? Prefix.
Oh.
The reason I was in a bit of a fluster about it was because I always say prefix.
Interesting.
But then I go, is that right? I don't know. All of the sources I found, the OED, various YouTube, here is how to pronounce this word sites, say prefix.
Yeah.
And I then wondered if I was perhaps mixing it up with the word preface.
Oh, that makes sense.
Now, preface is absolutely pronounced preface, but prefix, it would seem, is definitely pronounced prefix. So, the prefix DE, my God, so 2 little letters, so much to say.
So much.
So many interesting bits. So there are 9 different senses, 9 different meanings and usages for this prefix.
9?
9. Yeah.
Jeez.
It has an enormous entry in the OED where I started when I was having a look at it, and it is in fact a pirate. It comes to us from a pirate originally. Now, the pirate was also quite interesting. I've gotten myself lost. Let me just tell you a bit about D.
Okay.
Some of these senses, I'm just, my mind was utterly blown. So it's of multiple origins, the OED says, and it's partly a borrowing from French and partly a borrowing from Latin. And I think that this accounts for the vast range of meanings and usages for this prefix.
Right.
Because you can, of course, use it the way that I thought it was perhaps working in the word devastate. You can use it as a privative. In other words, it takes away from the sense of the word.
Right.
So another common privative in English is the alpha privative, as in amoral.
Yes.
Where you're saying the addition of that A means that you are negating or taking away the second part of the word.
Yeah.
So a person who is amoral is without morals. If you are asexual, you are without sex. So you can use D like that, and it is used in that sense. It's one of the ones on the list. So I'm just going to go through them in order. So first of all, as an etymological element, it has the senses of down, or down from, or down to.
Right.
Now, some of the examples given here are words like descend, or depress, or depose, or depend. These are all about putting things down.
Right, yeah.
Okay. You can also use it to mean off, away, or aside, as in decline, or defend, or designate.
Okay.
These are Latin usages, Latin formations. You can use it as in away from yourself, away from oneself. So like delegate.
Right.
To
yeah. Okay.
give the law to somebody else, if you like. You can also have the sense that, this is the sense that we're going to talk about in a moment regarding devastate, down to the bottom, or completely. So thoroughly, absolutely, methodically, and totally. Words that fall into this category include devastate, declaim, declare, denude, despoil, and derelict. These are all Latin formations.
Right.
You can also have to exhaustion. So deliquesce or decoct, quite unusual words there, but
yeah.
the sense given here is to the dregs. And then you can use it as, in a more sort of figurative down sense, to put someone down or to subject someone to an indignity. Words like deceive or delude or deride
degrade
have this usage. And you can then have, so in late Latin, decompositus was used by grammarians in the sense of formed or derived from a compound, passing later into that of compounded over again, doubly or further decompounded. So a very specific scientific word, in things like chemistry and botany, you have decomposites where
right.
it's like double composites, and that's what the D indicates within that word. We also have in Latin the function of undoing or reversing the action of a verb. So in this sense, like a privative. So you have things like
decompose.
Oh, I've lost my place. Yeah, the privative force gives you things like to de-anglicise or to so many D words, demoralise, de-Christianise,
right.
decompose, as you said. And then there's an absolutely enormous list of words that use this de-privative. It's huge. I think my favourite that I saw in the list is, let me just find it. It's to demonastery.
Oh.
Yeah. Which I suppose is a bit like defenestration, but it's slightly more building specific.
Yeah.
So yeah, to take one out of or to get rid of the monastery, I thought it was quite an interesting little word.
Yeah.
So the sense of thoroughly or completely is the sense that we get from in the word devastate or devastation, and devastate, the verb, is first cited around about 1638 we have.
Okay.
And the noun is a bit earlier than this, but not massively so. It's 1603, which is, peanuts in etymological senses. But it would seem to follow the usual pattern that we find of the noun existing first and the verb following on, hot on its heels, perhaps occurring at the same time, and the citations just happen to work out like that, or perhaps starting with the thing and then getting on to the doing of, the doings that are related to that thing.
Yeah.
Which we've seen again and again and again. So devastation, probably from the French devastation, a noun of action, devaster, and Latin devastare. It is defined as a wasting, spoiling, desolation, or destruction, and that's what that word means. It's quite a stable definition. So the action of devastating, or the condition of being devastated, laying waste, widespread destruction, or ravages.
Right.
We also get the word, the rare usage of devast, or devast. I'm not really sure how you would pronounce that. What with my prefix was, I now kind of feel like I don't know how to pronounce any words at all.
Right.
Ever. You know how that goes. However, so we know that in the sense of this word, the D part means to do something thoroughly. So what is it that we're doing thoroughly? We are, vastus is the Latin root that gives us this, laying waste, completely laying waste. And in fact, vastus, which means that the definition given on Etym Online is empty or desolate.
Right.
It's the word that gives us waste.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's the word that gives us vast.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
I was just thinking about that.
So we've got the idea of a big, empty thing, and this also has a pi root. The pi root is that little star that indicates a pi root, and it's E-U-E. Given that I'm already in a pronunciation pickle, I'm not going to give that a mash, not today. And it means to leave, abandon, or give out. And some derivatives mean abandoned or lacking or empty. And that EUE, interestingly, has made its way down through all of these various languages with a V sound. So I don't know, maybe the Indo-Europeans found this cluster of vowels particularly difficult to pronounce also, and so they decided on something a little bit less mind-melting, and so it became a V sort of sound. So it gives us cognates like avoid, devastation, devoid, and all void type words, evacuate as in to empty, evanescent, vacant, and all of those sorts of words, vacate, vacation, which made me laugh a little bit. When you go on vacation, you abandon your house.
Nice.
I am tired of this life. I wish to abandon it for a period of 1 to 2 weeks. So vacation, vacuity, vacuole, the cell body, vacuum, as in nature abhors a vacuum. And then also words like vain, which I thought was interesting. I suppose in that sense of emptiness or lacking. To be vain is to be kind of empty. We get vanish, presumably leaving a space behind you. Vaunt, which is a great word, we don't have that one enough. Void, and then words like wane, want, wanton. Again, I wonder if wanton has the sense of kind of being morally empty. And lastly, waste. So the pi root that gives us the vastare part, the Latin root that gives us devastation or devastate, is talking about emptiness. But there's the sense of laying waste to something, and the DE part means that you've not just laid waste to it, you have thoroughly and completely laid waste to it. Now, the other slightly interesting thing about the DE part of this word, as I said, lots of bang for its buck, it also comes from a pi root, but I'm a little bit confused by this, how we've gotten here. So,
right.
Etym Online gives the DE it's actually given as a prefix, de, with a dash, and then it's also given as de as in the Latin adverb and preposition of separation in space. So meaning down from, off, or away from. Now we've seen this in our various de senses in the OED. It's from the pi demonstrative stem, and it says here see to.
Oh.
To, as in, you know, going to somewhere in the direction of, or in the sort of general way. And I wanted to know a little bit more about this, and so I looked it up in the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Center Indo-European Lexicon pi etymon and IE reflexes.
I love how you need to pack a lunch when you start referring to that site.
Yeah, man, don't you need to pack a lunch? And it's showed us this this etymon de or do, and it followed this with a term that gave me all sorts of linguistic tingles, but that I had no idea what it meant. And the word is eideictic. That's deictic.
Oh.
And being a curious little bunny, as I am, I wanted to know what the word deictic meant. And I discovered that deixis, I looked it up on Wikipedia because, you know, I'm not fancy. And
right.
Wikipedia says it's the use of general words and places to refer to a specific time, place, or person in context. So words like tomorrow are deictic.
Okay.
There, as in I'm going over there. And
right.
They did it, you know, in the direction of those people.
Yeah, that's what they say.
They are deictic if their semantic meaning is fixed, but their denoted meaning varies depending on time and or place.
Right. Okay.
So words or phrases that require contextual information to be fully understood, for example, English pronouns, are deictic.
Right. Okay.
And there's a really cool little diagram on the Wikipedia page that shows you this kind of concept. And it has an XY axis with a little man person standing in the middle of it. And the person at the origin of the axes is the deictic centre. So like I, here, now, me, words like that. And then there's a little diagram with proximity and distance. So you can have, on the space deixis axis, you can have there. As if I, here, now, I'm pointing there on the space deixis axis to say there. And then the opposite axis is the time deixis axis, which has on it things like later, tomorrow, or soon, and before, recently, and yesterday. And I'd never really thought about this concept before, and it's quite lovely, because of course language is, well, it's unbelievably human, and what's more human than imagining that you're the centre of the universe?
Yeah, of course.
You know, I mean, I am the centre of my universe, as I presume you are the centre of yours, because all of the things I experience in my own particular way. But I wasn't familiar with this concept in language, and yeah, I found it really interesting. I'm going to read a little bit more about deixis, I think. So the etymon list that the incredibly long website name has got,
yeah.
It looks at DE and also TO. So these have come from the same, and you can kind of see that to and away from words are, you know, they're not a million miles from each other.
Yeah.
They don't seem to differentiate in this particular list between DE privative, DE thoroughly, DE down, DE towards, but there are lots of really lovely words. Giggle giggle, detumescence. We've got to, which a diminution of swelling is how it's defined here. Dement, to make insane or to destroy the mind.
Right.
Deflate, debase. Tattoo, I like this one. Call sounded before taps, meaning go to your quarters.
Oh.
Yeah, and Taptoo, I hadn't seen this, Taptoo, which I'm going to assume that Taptoo and tattoo are probably cognates. You know, one has probably replaced the other because Taptoo is a little bit more of a struggle to get your tongue around than tattoo is. But yeah, it's time for taps, go to your bed, pretty much.
Interesting.
And all sorts of other wonderful D and two words. Now, because devastate led me to this word where I got terribly interested in the prefix or prefix, I kind of got myself into a little bit of a fankle, a good Scots word, a little bit of a fankle about pronunciation.
Okay.
And I found myself wondering if, what did people do before the internet, where you could say, "Hey internet, how do you pronounce this word?" And I was surprised by how good and quick and easy it was for me to be able to do that. How do you pronounce prefix? It's like this. And I tried it on a dictionary site, I tried it on the OED, I tried it on an EFL learning site, I tried it on just literally YouTube videos that exist for no other reason than to say, here's how you say this word.
Yeah.
However, before the interwebs, it would seem long before the interwebs. Now, you know how we have a fondness on this podcast for incredibly long, detailed book titles?
Yes.
Buckle up.
Oh, sweet.
Because in 1840, Johann Walker was being published by Fisher and Son and Co. And his work... I'm loving this because there's a picture of the work. There's a picture of the spine of the book. And the spine of the book says, Walker's Pronouncing Dictionary, Improved Edition.
Right.
However, here is the title of this book. A critical pronouncing dictionary and expositor of the English language, to which are prefixed principles of English pronunciation, with rules to be observed by the natives of Scotland, England and London for avoiding their respective peculiarities, and directions to foreigners for acquiring a knowledge of the use of this dictionary. An entirely new edition with considerable improvements.
Oh, that's so good. I feel like if Shakespeare had been writing in the 1800s, like The Tempest would have been called something like, you know, an allegorical tale of political strife augmented by some magical creatures that occupy an island to which the supposed deposed leader has been sent to think about what he's done and his life and his relationship with his daughter, brackets, also an exposition on the life of a playwright and reflecting on his long and storied career, close brackets. Like, but because he was written in Elizabethan times, it's called The Tempest.
The Tempest.
So good.
I mean, you know, printing was not that old when Shakespeare was around. Maybe they charged by the word. Who knows? I mean, you wouldn't think so looking at like, Shakespeare's works, particularly. But in terms of the titles, you know, maybe you had to pay extra for the capital letters.
Yeah.
So it would seem that pronunciation is... my husband always pronounces it pronunciation to annoy me. And because... let's face it, it doesn't make a massive amount of sense that it's pronunciation. But, you know, English doesn't make sense.
No, sure doesn't.
It doesn't. But yeah, I really, really loved for avoiding their respective peculiarities. We don't want any of those, thanks.
No.
Let's all pronounce every word exactly the same. Now, where would be the fun in that? That would be devastating.
I feel like so much of 1840s was avoiding the messy particularities. Or peculiarities.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that sort of the history of civilization? How can I avoid as many things that I find onerous as possible?
Yeah, basically. It was interesting, like the concept of vast involving desolation and devastation and emptiness.
Yeah, as in the waste, you know, wastelands.
Yeah, like the wasteland, but it's also there's an area, like, I'm a big C.S. Lewis guy and Narnia and such, but Lantern Waste appears on the maps of Narnia just because it's an empty wooded area. But I got there in my head because I thought of, like, you wouldn't usually call something vast. Like, I mean, maybe if a landscape or an area is to be called vast, I think it either has to be very empty or viewed from very high above and you're doing a really big picture thing, at which point everything kind of gets flattened out anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But on the waste thing, I'm reading The Hobbit with my 10-year-old.
Oh,
And
that's literally the reason that you have children, isn't it?
it's pretty great. And he's super excited about it each time. And we kind of read a chapter or whatever before bed and such. And it's awesome. But the area around the Lonely Mountain is called the Desolation of Smog.
Yeah.
And the desolation being a place rather than an action or an event.
Now there's the
interesting.
thing. I wonder what sort of D is working in desolation.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Because soul, as in solace, as in alone.
Well, when you console someone, be with, but what's the SOL there? I wonder.
You're
looking it up, right?
Désolé. Désolé in the French sense. So it's again Latin and.
Oh, désolé
Latin
means
and French.
I'm sorry in French.
That's right. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. So if one is desolate, does it have the sol as in solitary? So Eto Online has render a region or place lonely by depopulation or devastation, lay waste or ruin. From desolate, meaning overwhelmed with grief, make sorry or weary by affliction. It is in fact, so D, completely, that sense of DE.
Right.
To completely make lonely. From solace alone. So a desolation is a place that has been made completely lonely.
I guess if you...
In this case, because there's a big fuck off dragon there.
Yeah. And if you console someone, you kind of become alone with them. I guess.
I'm enjoying this etymology on the hoof.
Interesting. Does it...
To offer solace. Oh, no.
Or is it different?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So, to console someone is to give solace.
Huh.
So solace, A-C-A, and solace, U-S, are different. Solace, the noun, is comfort in grief or consolation.
Right.
Interesting that they're used as synonyms. From Latin solicium, a soothing or assuaging, a comfort or consolation. From solatus, past participle of solari, which means to console or to soothe. From a suffix form of pyroot, sell, to reconcile.
Do you think that because the Olympics are on, we're actually trying to make podcast tangents like an Olympic event? Because I feel like we're making a good...
I think it's just who I am as a human being.
A good
Ryan.
run of it this episode. However, having...
That was the nicest get to the fucking point I've ever heard of.
Oh, I was lumping myself in with that too, because I'm happily riding down this trail with you, but interesting. I had never actually thought of devastation before, but the vast and the waste connection there is...
Yeah, I really, like I say, I looked it up and thought, oh, pretty straightforward. Maybe not enough to say for a whole episode, but those two little letters are very... I love looking up little words in dictionaries.
Yeah.
They usually have the longest entries.
Yes.
And you almost always learn something about them that you didn't know before.
For sure. Very cool. Well, interestingly, since we've come to kind of a bit of a sad place with our tangent into desolation and consolation and all that stuff, my word is sort of similar in that it was one that was very close to me, kind of being like, oh, that's same thing, kind of interesting, maybe not enough to talk about
Sure.
necessarily, but by the time you got all the way back and worked up one of the other roots or branches of the family tree, I thought it led to something kind of cool, and I hadn't thought about it before. This is also, so my word today is orphan.
Ooh, nice.
And
now this is interesting because I originally thought that devastation was an orphaned positive. if you like. You know, we have orphan
Right.
negatives. So I wondered if
Yeah.
it was an orphan positive. That was the reason I looked it up in the first place. Oh, what a terrible, terrible title. Devastation Orphan. Or Orphan
Yeah.
Devastation.
Or devastated orphan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and let me tell you this. That phenomenon where you look at a word and it loses all meaning eventually when you look at it and say it enough.
Orphan.
I've never experienced that like I did looking up this word. Because, oh man.
It's a bit like, you know, sometimes in films and animations and things, you see a character looking at something and then it sort of falls apart as they look at it.
Yes.
That's sort of what that feeling is like, isn't it?
100%. So
those letters can't make those sounds. Do they make those sounds? No. What even are sounds? What are letters? Who am I? How did this happen?
So the noun orphan, I mean, a child whose parents have died, at some point, at least, or rarely, could be just one parent. But I think, by and large, you're an orphan if you have to have lost both parents in order to be an orphan.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I didn't know there was the sense of having lost a parent. I thought it was both or nothing.
And so either a noun, a child who has gone through that, or an adjective being like bereft of one or both parents. But again, vastly more commonly, both parents. The dating on this is slightly confusing because the earliest OED citation is like around about 1450.
Okay.
Edom Online says circa 1300, but there's nothing else linking
that
it
is
to
interesting.
that. And I don't know why it says that, but it's. I mean, obviously the word is older than it wasn't just invented for English in 1450. So maybe there's something like that. But there's a couple things, and the timelines of this word in general were one of the things I found interesting enough to kind of go, I think I could use this. Because the noun and the adjective are both from that long ago, like mid-1400s or earlier. But the verb, like to orphan something, was not until the 1800s, 1814.
Oh, that is a long time.
And while there was a word orphanage in 1538, and so, you know, again, late 1400s, early 1500s as far as usage goes, but it didn't mean a place where orphans are housed and taken care of until the like sort of 1860s, 1870s.
What did it mean?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The earliest orphanage use was to refer to like how to deal with the guardianship of the property of orphans and the orphans themselves. So it sounds at first like similar, but it would be used in the context of one of the roles of the Lord Mayor of London was the orphanage of the city. The collective responsibility of if a child was orphaned, what do you do with the property of that child? What do you do with like so, as opposed to a specific place. Now that kind of came and went, and from 1570, orphanage just meant the condition of being an orphan.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so like you would say something like his orphanage started at age 13.
Right.
Or something like that. Other words, this is... So I just a general preface. I know our listeners are very charitable with this stuff. I'm going to say things like, this is a fun list, and then list off a number of different words for a child whose parents have died, and I don't mean fun...
Fun?
As an overall comment on the state. No, I just mean as a word nerd looking at words, you know?
We have a vested interest in words that are a bit unusual, and we're not poking fun at children who have lost their parents. Let's be clear about that.
I would prefer that we didn't need this word at all. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, sure. It would be nice if that was not a thing.
The fact that orphancy was another word for the state of being an orphan is interesting. And orphanhood, orphanism, and orphanship. And possibly my favorite, is that another word for orphanage, once orphanage became a place for orphans to be, another word for it was an orphanry.
An orphanry.
Which is interesting.
Again, injecting levity in this situation may seem inappropriate, but I really want to go full elf and say, "Ooh, that's fun to say."
Yeah, that's what
orphanry.
I found. I thought of an owlry or an apiary or something, but an orphanry. So there's a lot of weird things going on with the timeline and when the usage changed, and it's not even though the idea of an orphan, the extended use. So when you talk about orphan negatives or that type of idea, like not literally a child whose parents have died,
sure,
but I'm struggling to come up with an example, but some other use of that as something whose descendants or the origins are lost, or
I think too, it carries the connotations of loss and loneliness, and that sense of sort of powerlessness and having no one there to, so yeah, I'm also struggling to come up with an example because that seems to be how brains work, but but yeah, you can see that figuratively it's a word that might have other applications. I just don't happen to know any of those other applications right now.
But I do know that the figurative use is also very old.
Oh, okay.
Which made to me the fact that to orphan something as a verb took 300 more years.
Yeah.
350 more years to show up.
That seems very odd.
Was weird. So there's a lot of that stuff where it's just like, how did that happen? And why didn't that happen earlier?
It usually kind of goes noun, verb, figurative use of noun, doesn't it?
I think so. That's sort of like, if you had to typify it, it seems like that's sort of the general trend. But yeah, not here.
I love how much we don't know, so that we're like, maybe it could be sort of a thing.
So much.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. There's just so much.
If anyone knows more about this than us, which is, I suspect, quite a large category, please let us know. We would love to. We would genuinely love to know. Not so much that we're going to devote 6 months of our lives to researching it.
No,
but
heavens
no.
As far as, and this is so, the etymology of it specifically is why I kind of am slightly surprised that I chose it, because it's exactly the kind of thing that I've looked at other words like it and gone, well, it's just sort of been the same thing
forever, since
time immemorial. But it comes from the Latin orphanus, meaning parentless child, and from Greek before that, from a Greek root orphos, meaning bereft.
Oh, as in Orpheus.
I
wonder.
Interesting.
Sorry, continue.
So when you go back to the pi root, and I keep trying to remind myself to go into this. So pi, when we say pi root, it's the Proto-Indo-European root. And Proto-Indo-European, just as a really quick summary, is the sort of theorized and retconned proto-language that unites a vast family of languages. And it's sort of established by super smart people looking at words that are the same across languages that you otherwise wouldn't think they would have common words, and theorizing that, okay, well, those must have come from this original earlier language called Proto-Indo-European.
Anytime I hear an explanation of what pi is or read about it, I'm just baffled by Jacob Grimm, first and foremost, the sort of father of pi, but just the sheer madness required to undertake a task like that. Like, it really is. It's quite crazy.
Yeah.
To say, I reckon that there is an language out there. I love that prefix. I'm now going to say the word prefix at every opportunity because I can. I know how to say it now. But I love the first time I came across was in text for Bach organ music. And it's like the original one. But I like it because it sounds like something that a caveman would say.
Yeah.
I am here is my text. All else can flow from this.
I mean, all words are just organized noise that
Yeah.
we've all agreed mean things, but that one
Noise-organized.
especially.
Yeah, very much so.
But so this root that gives us the Greek root orphos, meaning bereft, meant both bereft of a father, but also deprived of free status.
Oh.
Which I thought was an interesting. It was one of those things where the language can sort of give you a bit of an insight into the society
Sure.
that used it. And that root comes from an earlier PIE root that meant something like to change status or to pass from one allegiance to another.
Oh, that's kind of horrible, isn't it?
It sort of is, but you can kind of there's a logical continuity there. Like
Yeah, like when you have parents, you're not an orphan. And then when you don't have parents, your status changes and you are.
yeah, and especially the deprived of free status.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, you are either just sort of left behind from society because you don't have that connection, the
Good old
familiar
democracy.
connection.
The Greeks
Yeah.
invented democracy. Everyone gets to vote. No.
No, heavens no. Those 4 guys get to vote.
Those 4
or
guys
you're
get to
taken
vote, and
in-
frankly, they better watch themselves.
Yeah. Or you're taken in, or you're like sort of taken in by another family, but clearly that didn't involve equal status with the children of that family.
Yeah, that's really horrible.
So, and this is one of those things that blows my mind about the concept of Proto-Indo-European, is that it had to have started with someone going, hey, did you ever notice that the Hittite word for to change allies is really close to the Sanskrit word for weak or child, which is also close to the old High German word for heir? What's that all about?
Yeah.
And to even come up with that as a sentence, that you've noticed that, the breadth of knowledge that you have to have before you even get to that point is just staggering to me.
We really are just getting dumber and dumber and dumber, aren't we?
I mean, I am.
Yeah.
But
I have no doubt in my mind that I am getting dumber.
thanks, beer.
But you know, like if I had lived, I mean, I'm not a great example historically because, you know, I would have had children and never had any books. But if you had lived in the 17th century, say, and you had been a man of means, then you would have been educated on all sorts of shit that people just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
And that was just as a matter of, like, not educated for a life as an academic, just the level of education was although I don't know, I mean,
The focus of education.
I suppose there's a sort of a in the good old days kind of thing. I was thinking about this the other day, about how the internet has given us access to so much information, but it really seems to, as a whole, have made society much dumber. Like, education is not information, and information is not intelligence.
Well, that's true. But the other descendants of this root word, that was the words that suggested to people that this root word would have existed, those descendants do include a Hittite word to change allies, a Sanskrit word for weak/child, and the word for like an heir, as in heir to the throne, in Old Irish, Old English, Gothic, and Old High German. The words for heir in all those languages. I'm not trying to pronounce any of them because I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what the word meant. But, and genuinely, this is why I chose this word, is that this root also went into Old Church Slavonic.
Yay! I heart Old Church Slavonic.
I literally, in my notes, I have the words Old Church Slavonic brackets yay, because I knew you were going to say that. I'm going to take a picture of it. I'm going to post it on Twitter so that people know that I'm not just making that up, because it's there. But the Old Church Slavonic was rabu, R-A-B-U, that meant slave. And rabota meant servitude, which is where Czech got the word that we then adopted as robot.
Oh, that's good.
right? So robot and orphan are
Robots
cognate,
all orphans.
right?
Now this is interesting because the notion of robot parents is like such a well explored trope.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to you about Red Dwarf the other week. There's a very great sort of the mechanoid Crichton on Red Dwarf. His creator, there's all this. There's sort of like it's not a mother-son relationship, but it's like I must respect this woman because she created me, and I could not
Right.
ever harm her, and that kind of thing. That's super interesting because like it's almost like there's a kind of Pinocchio mythological kind of feel to that whole party, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So orphan, ultimately to change status or being bereft or lost of free status, and actually took just a slight, and it's also sort of a butterfly effect, but for language, because the same root that took the twists and turns to give us orphan in that one Eastern European branch ended up meaning robot. So,
Orphan
who
Robot's a
knows?
good name for a band.
Orphan Robot is.
Or indeed Robot Orphan.
I'll have to think about it, or which one I prefer.
That's super cool. Do you know what?
Yeah.
One of my favourite things about this word is, and you've probably, I don't know if this would have been like in the OED when you looked it up, but it's one of these words where there seems to have been a bit of confusion over the ages as to whether the word is an orphan or a norphan.
Oh, right.
And an orphan is just, and again, you know, obviously not super pleasing, but an orphan is just super pleasing.
Yeah, I didn't see that,
No.
and
Maybe, I wonder if
it feels like it might be, like it doesn't seem to have had the same thing as like the word orange.
Yeah.
But which started as naranja or naranja or something like that. Norange. But because of the Latin is orphanus and the Greek is orphos, like
Sure.
it seems to have not had an initial consonant sound.
But I'm
throughout
sure
its-
I've sure I've seen it written down somewhere as a norphan. I'll look that up. I'll see what.
I wonder if that's like one of these back formations.
Yeah,
or
maybe.
folk etymology, or similar to sort of the backronyms that you see all over the place. I don't know. But yeah,
Orphan.
devastated orphan. Hooray. Yeah.
What
We
can I
have
say?
fun here.
Some weeks it's Monster Island, some weeks it's Devastated Orphan.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.